That's not
All right, guys, 9:15. That time again on this gloomy British morning. Isn't it? Feels like England out there. It's all fog and gloom. I understand why the English were very empire focused, because I would want to get out of there too, find some sun. All right, so we'll start with our summary that we came up with last time. The title was Moses saves Reuel's daughters and gets a wife from among them. God hears Israel's cries and calls Moses out of a burning bush, that he will be used to bring the children of Israel out of Egypt. And the storyline was, Moses saves the daughters of Reuel, or Jethro, it's also his other name. Moses marries Zipporah. Moses and Zipporah have a son, Gershom. The king of Egypt died. God hears the cry of his people. We had the burning bush, of course. God warns Moses that he is standing on holy ground. Take off your sandals. God identifies himself as the God of his ancestors. And God tells Moses he's the guy to take his people out of Egypt. Where we left off. 2. Or number 3. Okay. So then for this week, Eli gave us the title this week. Thank you, Eli. Moses continues to question God's plan of using him to deliver the Israelites out of Egypt, and God gives Moses 3 miracles to use to convince them that he appeared to Moses. Aaron and Moses will be sent together. So this was Exodus 3, verse 13 through chapter 4, verse 17. So what happens in this story? What's the first thing? Mainly Moses' conversation with God.
Burning bush.
Yep. I'm going to put all 3 of them in there. Okay. What's the first thing they talk about?
What do you call God?
Yes. So Moses' first question last time was, who am I? And this one was, who are you? What is God's name? It is A-A. Gotta spell it right. A-Yeh, Asher, A-A. Or Yahweh. Okay. So it was, I will be what I will be, right? Or he is. His name is the verb to be. So then, what happened? What's the next question? Question number 3. Well, actually, the next thing is not a question. He tells them what to do, right? God says, go plunder the Egyptians. Then we get the third question. This would have been my question.
How will they believe me?
Yeah, nobody's going to believe me. Then what do we get?
Staff turned to a snake.
Yep. Staff in the snake, the leper's hand, and the Nile into blood. Of course, he doesn't actually do the Nile into blood there because the Nile isn't there. He just has to take that one on faith. And then what?
And he says, I can't do it because I don't know how to talk.
Yep.
Eloquent.
Not a good speaker. Okay, and then what's the last one?
He
Did he say something about his brother?
What?
He gets angry.
Yeah, God gets angry because Moses is just like, I just don't want to do it.
And gives him Aaron.
Yeah, so he picks Aaron.
Yep. God gets angry. God brings the older brother. I'm going to call him the enforcer. Make sure Moses does it. Alright, that look good to you guys? Miss anything? Okay. That one's done. So we're going to start back in. So what we saw last time, I got a few notes that didn't quite get fully covered last time. First we learned that essentially God will be what he will be. We can't really know him from just a name or something like that. So we have to read this to figure out what he is. We have to watch what happens. That's kind of what he's telling Moses. You have to watch and see what happens. Once you see it happen, you'll start to learn about me, right? And so first part, that's exciting, right? Like, how exciting is it that as we keep reading this, we're going to get to learn more about the creator of the universe? Isn't that what most people would like to learn more about? So it's going to be fun to keep going. But the second point was, don't make up a god. Like, say, God would never have actually killed the Hebrew first, or the Egyptian firstborn, right? Like, all these things that God does for punishment in the Old Testament, a lot of people look at that as like, oh, well, God wouldn't really have done that, The God I've created in my head wouldn't actually hurt anybody, right? And that's what he's saying here is, don't do that. Don't create a God in your own head and then think you're going to judge the God that actually exists by the one that you made up. You have to read to see who he is. But you notice that God did not describe himself. If I were God, I would have come to Moses and said, I'm the creator of the entire universe. I'm the most important God. Listen to me, right? That's not what God said. He did not identify himself as the creator of the universe. He said, I am your people's tribal God. And here's my name. He stuck entirely in the tribal narrative. He didn't even say, I created all the other gods and apportioned the nations to them, and I kept you for myself. We learned that at Babel. Remember back in Genesis? He didn't even say that. He doesn't even tell him I'm the Most High God. It's almost like he has to show him that. Because when he gets to Egypt, God is going to put down the Egyptian gods one after another, after another, after another. It's almost like if he had just told Moses this up front, he wouldn't have believed him, because it's just this little fire in a bush in the middle of nowhere in the desert. And we ended last time on that Moses didn't really want the job, right? I contrasted that with Pharaoh. Moses is the anti-Pharaoh, and Pharaoh is the anti-Moses. That Moses does not want power. He's the reluctant man of God, and Pharaoh wants nothing but power, right? And so I see that as one more fractal pattern in history, because later on, Jesus Christ does not seek his own glory, but the Antichrist does nothing but seek his own glory. So we have a little prefiguring of Christ and the Antichrist here in Moses and Pharaoh. We also now learned last time why a better answer for why did God pick Moses. When the story started, we had a pretty good answer in that Moses was the man who could not sit idly by when he saw evil take place. He hated evil, right? And that was a good answer for why God would have picked Moses. But when we go through this conversation, I think we learn a little bit more. First of all, I'm gonna write a few of these on the board just so we can kind of remember them, as these are the characteristics of Moses. So the first one is a phrase I've used a few times so far, broken vessels. Only God carries water in broken vessels, because that's how you know that it's God acting. Because when we carry water in a broken vessel, it all leaks out. When God carries it, it all stays in. You know it's a miracle. When God picks a guy with a stutter to go stand before Pharaoh and pull his people out of Egypt, I don't know if it was a stutter or what, but he couldn't speak well, right? He says, I'm not the guy for the job. I don't have the qualifications. And God says, I don't care. You're the guy. So that's the first one. The next one we just talked about is he didn't want the job. The fundamental problem with democracy is that the only people who you can vote for are the ones who want the job. But the best leaders are the ones who don't want the job. They don't want power. The guys who want power, all of them are inevitably corrupted by it. And in fact, nearly every human being gets corrupted by power. It's almost impossible to be in power and not get corrupted by it. Moses himself, the archetype of this humble man who didn't want power, even he falls prey to it. In the end, there's one miracle where he's mad at the people and he just strikes the rock and water comes out, and he does not attribute it to God. And so God says, because you did not attribute that miracle to me, you can't go into the promised land. Like, Moses essentially said, I'm doing this, not God. And so even Moses gets corrupted by that. But the fact that he doesn't want the job is one of the biggest reasons why he's the guy that should have it. Another reason, this one's important, is he's an outsider. When he goes back to speak to the Hebrews and say that God had spoken to me, if he had grown up with them, they would not have listened to him. We know from Jesus, right, that a prophet is not respected in his hometown. If he was just the Moses who grew up with me down the street, he can't gain that elevated status, right? Like, if I'm up here speaking to you and I'm an expert that had come from 100 miles away giving you the exact same talk, you inherently give that talk more weight. It affects you more because this is not a person you know. The more familiar you are with someone, the less stock you put in what they have to say, the less you're impressed by their credentials, right? Like, for example, my wife is the one most familiar with me, and she's the least moved by anything I have to say. So that's a big one. He had to pick an outsider, or the Hebrews would not have listened to him. It could not have been from among their own stock. But somehow, ironically, he's also an insider. If he had not been Hebrew, they wouldn't have listened to him either, because he wouldn't have been part of their group. And he wouldn't. When he said, "I'm going to take you out," they would have looked at him with no trust at all. Like, why do you care about us at all? But now that he's part of their group, but he didn't grow up with them, this makes him like the perfect candidate to be the guy to pull them out. And the last one, this was from Dennis Prager, and I think this is really important. Because he did not grow up in slavery, Moses did not have a slave mentality. If he had had a slave mentality, he could not have led them to freedom. Escaping slavery, you can take the human out of slavery, but it is much harder to take the slavery out of the human. Learning how to live in freedom when you've lived your entire life controlled by someone else, when now you have to actually decide what to do, that is a very difficult skill to develop. I mean, we do that in a curated way when our kids move out of the house, right? And you know how scary that can be as to what, are they going to turn out to be a good human or a bad human? But imagine if they'd been abused their entire life. Do you have any hope that they're going to grow up when they're on their own and become a good human? And so, in fact, the Jews here, the Israelites that do escape, it's because of that slave mentality that only 2 of them make it to the promised land. Every single one of them dies. God will not let them into the promised land. Because of how their slave mentality plays out, there's only 2, Caleb and Joshua, that get to make it. Even Moses doesn't make it. And the last one here, or the last part of this, is if Moses had a slave mentality, he could only have led them into victimhood. All he would have done was stoke their anger against the Egyptians, and they would have simply seen themselves as victims the entire time. And that is the true sadness of the end of slavery. I mean, you can see it in our own culture today. Like, to the extent that black leaders tell their constituents that all white people are devils, they're just keeping them in that the slavery of victimhood. The slavery of victimhood is, I'm not in control of my life. All the wrong things that happen to me are outside of my control. They're somebody else's problem. When you're in freedom, the stuff that happens to you is your problem. And so you try to fix it. When you're a victim, you're just in despair. You have no hope. You have nothing you can do. And so if you just sat here, if Moses had just stoked their anger against the Egyptians, they never would have made it to the promised land anyways, right? That God had to go through this 40-year transformational period to try to create a people that did not have the slave mentality anymore. And so these are the reasons, I think, along with Moses' just hatred of evil, that he's the perfect guy. even though he doesn't think he's the perfect guy. All right, so let's jump into chapter 4, verse 18. So Moses went back to Jethro, his father-in-law, and said to him, "Please let me go back to my brothers in Egypt to see whether they are still alive." And Jethro said to Moses, "Go in peace." And the Lord said to Moses in Midian, "Go back to Egypt, for all the men who were seeking your life are dead." So Moses took his wife and his sons and had them ride on a donkey and went back to the land of Egypt. And Moses took the staff of God in his hand. Moses here shows great respect for Jethro, right? I wouldn't think he had to go back and ask this guy, "Can I go?" But he did. I think it's partly another sign that Moses didn't want to lead. He had not spun out a family on his own. He had a son, he had a wife, and he hadn't gone out to create his own family that they would come back and visit Jethro. Jethro's still the patriarch. Moses is at 80, Moses is willingly under Jethro in this position, and he goes to Jethro to ask. And so he shows him great respect, and he's a pagan priest, right? It's not even like he has anything to do with God, but I want you to imagine, well, there's something he doesn't say to Jethro here that is just glaring, that it's not there. He doesn't say, "God spoke to me in the wilderness and told me to go to Egypt." He says, "I just want to go back and see if any of my brothers are still alive." It's like leaving out a very important detail. And it may be that if you imagine your son-in-law coming to you one day and saying, "God spoke to me and he told me to rescue the modern Christian Iranians from their oppressive regime with nothing but a snake staff and a prayer." Like, are you really going to buy it? I mean, remember familiarity, right? He knows Moses really well. He's not the external expert that came in with the staff that turns into a snake. He's his son-in-law. So maybe he didn't tell him because that wouldn't have gone over very well. I don't know. So, verse 21, and the Lord, Yahweh said to Moses, "When you go back to Egypt, see that you do before Pharaoh all the miracles that I have put in your power. But I will harden his heart so that he will not let the people go. And then you shall say to Pharaoh, 'Thus says Yahweh, Israel is my firstborn son. And I say to you, let my son go, that he may serve me. If you refuse to let him go, behold, I will kill your firstborn son.'" So why does God tell Moses again? He's spoken to Moses 3 times. At the bush, and then he tells him, "Go back to Egypt, everybody's dead." And now he tells him again, "When you go, do the miracles." I think Moses is waffling. Moses is not exactly hurrying around to go. It's like the kids when they don't want to go somewhere. Suddenly they can't find one of the shoes. And they only have one sock. And they just don't know. And actually they have no clothes left at all anywhere in the house. And I wonder if Moses is doing that. And that's why God's like, "Everybody's dead. You can go back now. Take the staff. Do this." That's why he's prodding Moses to get going. But we hit here one of the hardest parts of the Old Testament. That God is going to harden Pharaoh's heart. What does that mean? A lot of people struggle with this idea as, do we have free will or not? And this sounds like God is taking away Pharaoh's free will so that he can enact all these plagues. And does God take away our free will? And if he does, why is he punishing us? Why is he punishing the Egyptians for having taken away the free will of Pharaoh in the first place? It's not fair. And the problem is that's the surface reading of hardening his heart. I mean, clearly hardening his heart meant strengthening his resolve, right? Hardening his heart meant to give him the ability to do what he would have done if he was not under the threat of cosmic punishments, right? The reality is the cosmic punishments would take away Pharaoh's free will. God hardening Pharaoh's heart gives it back to him. So it's the exact opposite of what the surface reading is. This is God saying, I am going to give Pharaoh his free will back. They're going to get the punishments they deserve, and I'm going to keep Pharaoh making the decisions he would have made if I wasn't holding a gun to his head. So it's the exact opposite of what most people think that means, that God hardening Pharaoh's heart. When he's hardening a heart, he's giving you your free will back. He's saying, you decide what you want to do. I'm not going to help you make that choice. Strangely, we translate it as heart. The because we think our mind is in our brain up here, and we think our feelings are in our heart. And in those days, they actually thought the mind was in the heart, and your feelings were in your kidneys, believe it or not. So I think it's still accurate to say heart, because strengthening his mind is actually strengthening, the resolve as well. We do also see, though, that God had this all planned out. The firstborn was going to die from the start. It wasn't like we had to finally make it there. God knew the plan from the beginning. But, and it really is a fitting punishment for the people that threw the Hebrew boys into the river, that their firstborn die as well. That is justice. You get what you did to someone else. But this will be important later. God tells Moses, do all the miracles first, then tell Pharaoh that I'm going to kill his son if he doesn't let my people go. That's what he's told him. So, verse 24. At a lodging place on the way, Yahweh met him and sought to put him to death. Then Zipporah took a flint and cut off her son's foreskin and touched Moses' feet with it and said, surely you are a bridegroom of blood to me. So he let him alone. It was then that she said, a bridegroom of blood, because of the circumcision. I am so glad it explained that. Thankfully, it put that explanatory sentence at the end, so now we know exactly what's going on there. The second sentence has nothing to do with the first sentence when you're reading it, right? It's like Yahweh went to put him to death, whoever him is, and then Zipporah cut off her son's foreskin. I imagine Gershon is like, Mom, are you sure? Like, are you sure this is what we have to do? I don't see anything in the text, Mom, that says this is the problem. But anyways, it's happening anyway. So there's nothing but questions here. This is one of the hardest to understand little passages in the entire Bible. Nobody knows what this means. First off, we don't know who God was going to kill. You think it's Moses, but it doesn't say Moses. It says him. And what did we just finish talking about? We just finished talking about Pharaoh's firstborn son. Who's the one that needs to be circumcised? Gershom. So it's perfectly reasonable that the him is his son. It's Gershom who the Lord came by to kill, because Moses has a job. And so the him could be Gershom, or it could be Moses. We don't know why he was going to kill him. He doesn't say it was because of the circumcision. He just says he was there on the road to kill him. We don't really know what circumcision has to do with it. We don't know why their son was not circumcised already, because Moses was a Hebrew. And we don't even know if bridegroom of blood is a good thing or a bad thing. Other than that, it's perfectly clear what is going on here, right? So I will give you two equivalent alternatives here that you can pick between. So my guess, if you make me pick, my guess is, I just read it without thinking through it. My guess is Moses wanted to circumcise their son since it was his people's custom. Zipporah did not. They've been living in Midian with her dad, the Midianite priest, right? They've been living in Midian's culture. He doesn't have strong ties back to the Hebrew culture. And so Zipporah says no. Moses was wanting to. They were arguing. It reached a point of impasse where God was finally going to come down and kill either Moses or Gershom. And so Zipporah finally gives in, is like, fine. So she goes and cuts it off and throws it at Moses' feet. She's mad. She's like, I lost the argument. Like, this is all your fault. And says, you're a bridegroom of blood. So if that was the case, it would seem that Moses and Zipporah do not have a great relationship. They argue a lot about very important things like this. Now here's a perfectly valid alternative. So either Moses and Zipporah were mad at each other, or the Lord appeared here to show how seriously he took his covenant of circumcision. So God did this to show Moses that he's not above the law. I will take Pharaoh's firstborn son, and I will take your firstborn son. Just because I chose you to do this job doesn't mean you don't have to follow the law. And the law was you circumcise your children. Moses is still waffling about it. He didn't say yes. He didn't say no. So Zipporah just takes matters into her own hands and says, fine, I'll do it. Because, of course, if Moses was healthy, if he's not the one who was made sick by the Lord, then why didn't Moses do it? Men did the circumcision generally in the family, not the mom. And so why did Zipporah go do it? So then she tells Moses. So she took matters into her own hand. The Lord is there. He's going to kill one of the two men in her life. So she says, I'm taking care of this. Cuts off the foreskin, gives it to Moses, and now she's telling him that we are tightly bound together by blood. You are a husband of blood, like a blood right, a blood oath to me. And so she sees this blood oath as a protective thing, that they've sealed themselves protectively with the God of Yahweh as their protector now instead of their antagonist. So this could also be that. They're completely opposite stories from the exact same things. So what I think we can say is fundamentally, we do see that God is telling Moses, you're not above the law. In either story, it's sort of like, Moses, just because I picked you doesn't mean that you don't have to do what everybody else has to do. That's about the only lesson we can take from that. The rest of it is all ambiguous. It's one of those we'll have to ask God someday. All right, so verse 27. The Lord said to Aaron, go into the wilderness to meet Moses. And so he went and met him at the mountain of God and kissed him. And Moses told Aaron all the words of Yahweh which he had sent him to speak, and all the signs that he had commanded him to do. And then Moses and Aaron went and gathered all the elders of the people of Israel. And Aaron spoke all the words that Yahweh had spoken to Moses, and did the signs in the sight of the people. And the people believed. And when they heard that the Lord had visited the people of Israel, and that he had seen their affliction, they bowed their heads and worshipped. So I think we see here that when Moses was giving his 5 arguments to God, and the one where he finally says, look, Aaron's going to come, he's going to speak for you, God had already told Aaron, go. That's why he's on the way to the mountain of God. So God already knew. He was one step ahead of Moses the whole time. It wasn't that Aaron had just decided one day, I'm going to go to Midian. I don't know, I have this feeling. God said, go to Midian. So the elders get gathered together. Moses and Aaron come in. And they say, the God of your ancestors 400 years ago, who's been completely silent while the Egyptians tortured you, has appeared to me in the desert in Saudi Arabia and told me to come overthrow the government and take you to a land that neither you, nor your parents, nor your grandparents, nor your great-grandparents have ever seen. And they're like, well, why isn't Moses telling us that? Why is it you? Well, he doesn't speak very well. Yeah, we're going to need some signs. Right? Like, that town hall meeting would not go well.
No.
So the signs, it says he does the signs. He spoke to the elders, but he did the signs in the sight of the people, right? Well, there's 2 million people, so he must be sort of up on some raised area, and all day long, 2 million people are coming by, and he's doing the snake on the ground, and the hand in the thing, and the Nile turning to blood and everything. He's just doing this over and over and over again. How else are 2 million people, all the people, going to see that this guy is actually doing miracles from God? Of all of those, I think the bleeding Nile would have had the most impact on the Hebrews, though. Because the snake was the most terrifying. That's the one that would make you go, whoa. But to watch the lifeblood of Egypt, like the artery of Egypt, get pricked, and watch Egypt's power bleed out on the ground before you, I think that's probably the one that really stuck with them. Our God can control even the very life of Egypt. So could you imagine being one of these people? Your ancestors for 4 generations have been stuck in slavery in Egypt here. You've been stuck in slavery with no hope. And suddenly this guy comes and says, there is a God out there who cares about you. He has the power to do this, see? And he is going to take you out. Do you know how? Well, first you wouldn't believe him, right? You finally see them, but that moment your brain ticks over. Do you know what this may actually be going to happen? Can you imagine what that would feel like? The relief of, we're going to be free. We're going to be out of here. I don't even have to fight. Like, of course I'm going to fall down and worship this God. Like, oh, Yahweh, this is amazing. But of course, they know nothing about Yahweh. They don't know anything about this God. And it's going to take a very long time before they figure out that this God is not like the Egyptian gods. It's not that we make statues of him and we have giant ornate temples and all the processionals. This is a completely different God. So everybody ends stoked for tomorrow. Tomorrow is the day. And Aaron's excited. The elders are excited. The people are excited. it's going to happen. I imagine Aaron came over. Aaron's favorite movie was Les Miserables. I don't know if you guys knew that or not. But so he came over and he whispered to Moses some lines from a couple of songs in that particular musical. He says, "Moses, do you hear the people sing? Singing a song of angry men. It's the music of a people who will not be slaves again. When the beating of your heart echoes the beating of the drums, there's a life about to start when tomorrow comes." And then he turns to the people and Aaron says, "Tomorrow is the judgment day. Tomorrow we'll discover what our God in heaven has in store. One more dawn. One more day. One day more." Everybody's excited. And this is the undoing of Aaron and Moses. Yes?
You just quoted lyrics from that movie.
Yes, I did. That's what I said.
But also,
It was Aaron's
also
favorite movie. That's why I said
Also
that.
sad ending though, but
Kind of. They all end up in heaven at least. So
Yeah,
that's the happy
true.
part of the sad ending. But I could not think of any more poetic song of anticipation than those two songs in that movie. It's like, it's coming. It's tomorrow. Everybody's cheering. 2 million people have come by and have gotten that feeling of we're going to finally be freed. And Moses is riding high. And Aaron is riding high. And now let's go talk to Pharaoh. Afterward, Moses and Aaron went and said to Pharaoh, "Thus says Yahweh, the Elohim of Israel, let my people go, that they may hold a feast to me in the wilderness." But Pharaoh said, "Who is Yahweh, that I should obey his voice and let Israel go? I do not know Yahweh, and moreover, I will not let Israel go." And then it all broke. All of that, yes! They're like, now what? So now they revert back. Wait, what did God tell me to say? And what did God tell me to say? And so then he says, and they said, the Elohim of the Hebrews has met with us. Please let us go a 3 days journey into the wilderness, that we may sacrifice to the Lord our God, lest he fall upon us with pestilence or with the sword. But the king of Egypt said to them, "Moses, Aaron," was that your names? Yeah, that was it. "Moses, Aaron, why do you take the people away from their work? Get back to your burdens." And Pharaoh said, "Behold, the people of the land are now many, and you make them rest from their burdens." The same day, Pharaoh commanded the taskmasters of the people and their foremen, "You shall no longer give the people straw to make bricks, as in the past. Let them go and gather straw for themselves. But the number of bricks that they made in the past, you shall impose on them. You shall by no means reduce it, for they are idle. And therefore they cry, 'Let us go offer sacrifice to our God.' Let heavier work be laid on the men, that they may labor at it, and pay no regard to lying words." This did not go how Moses and Aaron expected. So my first question was, how did they get the meeting at the palace? Because Amenhotep II does not know Moses. Moses left. Amenhotep II is 27 right now. And Moses has been gone for 40 years. So he wasn't even born for 13 years after Moses had already left. And it's not like Moses was an important guy. Maybe they still knew somebody at the palace. I don't know. But I want to compare. The reason I went through that whole build-up was because it's my best explanation for why Moses and Aaron flubbed it. I would just like to compare what God told Moses and Aaron to do with what they actually did. So here you go. About as big as I can make it right there. Here's what God told Moses to do. Exodus 3:18 and 4:21, the two times he told him what to do. He said, "You and the elders of Israel," he says elders, I put it in red, "the elders of Israel shall go to the king of Egypt and say to him, 'Yahweh, the Elohim of the Hebrews, has met with us. And now please let us go a 3 days journey into the wilderness, that we may sacrifice to Yahweh our Elohim.' And Yahweh said to Moses, 'When you go back to Egypt, see that you do before Pharaoh all the miracles that I have put in your power. But I will harden his heart, so that he will not let the people go. Then you shall say to Pharaoh, 'Thus says Yahweh, Israel is my firstborn son, and I say to you, let my son go, that he may serve me. If you refuse to let him go, behold, I will kill your firstborn son. Now, what did Moses and Aaron actually do? Did the elders go with them? He says, we got the elders, right? Tell him that the Elohim of the Hebrews has said this, not Israel, the Hebrews. He met with us. He said, say please. He said, give him a timeline. It's only going to be for 3 days. We just want to go into the wilderness. We're not leaving forever. And we need to go to sacrifice to our God. He also tells them, do all the miracles, and then say, if you don't let him go, I'll kill your firstborn son. What did they do? They walked in without the elders, no elders, and they said to Pharaoh, thus says Yahweh, the Elohim of Israel. That's not what he said, Elohim of the Hebrews. Let my people go, that they may hold a feast to me in the wilderness. No timeline, no sign that they're coming back, no pleas, no elders, no miracles, no threatening to kill his firstborn son. Everything God told him to do, they did not do. So then it's reasonable that two guys, remember they're 80 years old, right? This is like Walter Matthau and Jack Lemmon, grumpier old men walking into before Pharaoh. They're not these big regal guys. They're 80 leaning over on the staff. And they say, thus says Yahweh, the Elohim of Israel, let my people go. Because, of course, they've just had 2 million people cheering them on for the previous day, right? Then they remembered. After he says, who's Yahweh? Then they remembered, and they got pretty close with the second round. Oh, well, the Elohim of the Hebrews has met with us. Please let us go a 3 days journey into the wilderness that we may sacrifice to Yahweh, our Elohim. And then, in one of the dumbest moves in history, they added, if you don't let us go, it's not that he'll kill your firstborn son, he'll hurt us. Please let us go so our God doesn't hurt us. To which Pharaoh had said, the whole point of your slavery was to break your spirit. So now God's going to come do it for me? I'm not letting you go. He's going to do my job.
I can just hear the Lord face smacking right now.
So until I put these two side by side, it didn't fully dawn on me just how much they flubbed it, right?
Yeah,
they blew it. They completely blew it. There is a big question of what happened to the elders. There's actually a story in the Midrash. Remember we talked about that before, the Jewish filling in the gaps stuff. There's a story in the Midrash that all of the elders left with them, and it was like the Berenstein Bears spooky old tree book, that one by one they got scared and they filtered off until they finally got to the palace and only Moses and Aaron were left. So I don't know if that's actually what happened, but the elders were not there. It was just Moses and Aaron. I think the real explanation, though, is that they were so running on excitement and adrenaline that they went in and they were like, this is going to happen. They completely forgot that God said it's not going to work. But what was wrong with what Moses did? Why not just go in? Why didn't God tell Moses, go in and say, let my people go? What was wrong with that? I think the reason is that God intended with this, when he says say please, it's just 3 days, he's intending to show us that pulling the people out of slavery entirely was not Pharaoh's problem. If he had only said, let us have a break for 3 days, please, he still denied it. That was God's point. He was showing Egypt, he was showing Pharaoh, he was showing Moses, he was showing the Hebrews, and he's showing us today that it was not extracting them out of slavery that Pharaoh was rejecting. It was, I'm not going to let them do anything. Not even a 3 days break. But compare Pharaoh's response to the introduction of Yahweh, to Moses' response to the introduction of Yahweh. When God said, I am Yahweh to Moses, Moses said, who am I? I'm not that important. Who am I to do this job? And when Moses said, Yahweh says this to Pharaoh, what did Pharaoh say? He said, who's Yahweh? Yahweh's not even worth my time. And Moses said, I'm not worth Yahweh's time. We have a definite anti-Moses, or Pharaoh and anti-Pharaoh relationship here. That was actually pointed out by Nachum Sarna, the Jewish commentator. So, But what is he asking to do? Why is just the 3 days to sacrifice not going to happen? It gives us a clue later on in the story. Oh, I thought I already had this open. Yeah, this is the one. Hey, it's already open. So let's just look at some of the Egyptian gods, okay? Here's one of the big Egyptian gods, Amun-Ra. What does this look like?
Ram?
A ram, yeah, like a male sheep, or male goat. Hathor, the goddess Hathor, is a cow, right? Longhorn cow. The Apis bull, the strong god, the god of strength. It's a big bull. The combination of the sun god Ra and the god Herakti was a falcon-headed guy. Here. Horus was also a falcon. Anubis was a jackal. Thoth was also a falcon. Sekhmet was had the head of a lion, a lioness. Khonsu had the head of a falcon as well. There's Heket, we'll see in the plagues, had the head of a frog when the frogs come. This is the goddess Heket. They all have animal-like features, and the animals that they worship are the animals that the Hebrews are asking to go slaughter and burn to their god. And so you think, well, but the Egyptians sacrificed too. That's not how Egyptian religion worked. They did not sacrifice the animals. Any animals they did sacrifice were not the holy ones. They were ones that they would sacrifice as food for the gods, and it was not a major part of the ceremony. A major part of the ceremony was taking the ram and parading it through, and like bowing down to it as they do the processional, not slaughtering it and putting it on the altar and burning it to God. So if the shepherds who took care of the animals were abominations, imagine how much the god killers are, the ones who are going to slaughter them and burn them. A really, really interesting part of this story. Back in 1851, there was an Egyptologist named Auguste Mariette, and he was hunting for some Coptic Christian manuscripts in Egypt. And he became obsessed with this cemetery area out in the middle of the desert in Egypt called Saqqara. And he's out there walking around and he notices this little sphinx head poking out of the sand. And they go and they clear out the sphinx and they see another sphinx. And they clear out that sphinx and they find another sphinx. And they follow it and it's this long avenue of sphinxes. And at the end of the avenue of sphinxes, they find this huge network of tunnels. And in the tunnels, there are 24 sarcophaguses carved from solid granite that weigh 80 tons. And the lid alone weighs 25 tons. They could not get the lid off the sarcophaguses. And when they finally get the lids off of one of these 24 sarcophaguses, this is what it looks like in there. There's another one. They've, of course, made it all look nice now. He was doing it in the dark with a candle. But not spooky at all. You see some of these here. They're huge. And do you know what they find in there? A mummified bull.
Oh, it's not the eye.
There were 2 bulls left in there. There were 2 left. There were 2 mummified bulls. Those are the 2 mummified bulls. This is the god Apis. That when one of the holy bulls of Apis died, they embalmed the thing, had a massive ceremony for it, buried it in this 80-ton tomb. I mean, this is not only, I don't know how they did it. It had to be expensive. Like, this is what their entire civilization revolved around. And they're asking to go out in the wilderness and kill the bulls and burn them to Yahweh. And that's why later on, Pharaoh gives Moses the option. He's like, just stay here and do your sacrifices. And Moses says, no. It'd be a complete abomination to the Egyptians. They'd stone us where we stood. Like, there's no way we'd survive.
They had good structure around the tomb, though.
Yes, they did.
Bolts and everything.
Yeah, well, that's because there was an earthquake and it started to collapse, and so they've been in there like rebuilding this thing. That's where the structure. Because I asked the same thing. I'm like, wow, did they have steel I-beams back then?
Right.
So they call that the Serapeum. If you've never heard of that before, you can go visit it.
Also, the bulls still had their eyes.
I think it's
Yeah, wasn't that crazy? I didn't leave it up there.
Isn't that-
'Cause
is
it
it not
creeps me out
painting?
staring at
'Cause
them. But
I know a lot of times they would wrap the people and they put like paintings on the cloth or whatever.
I didn't see. I don't know if there's paintings.
It looks
but
like
you
it's
can
got
see the
face
mummy. You
wrapped.
see the mummy strips and everything. They legit did for this bull what they did for Pharaoh.
It's like it's staring into my soul.
I'll take it off. But do you notice something missing from my webpage of gods? There's no Yahweh.
No.
There's no picture of Yahweh in my webpage of gods. This was a completely unique innovation in the world. All the other gods had animal forms. All the other gods had pictures and statues and everything. And this God made it one of the 10 things you're not allowed to do. You cannot make a graven image of me. Don't even try. I can't be represented by some animal merged onto a human or something like that. There's no Yahweh picture on there. This God is completely different. And what it means is he can't be represented by nature. And so what we're going to see, I think, hopefully you feel this deep in your soul by the time we're done with the plagues, is that God, our God, is outside of nature. He is not a part of nature. That is probably the biggest innovation that the Torah brought onto the human world, is that this God is not part of nature. And that's why when you see the world become more secular, it inevitably becomes more worshipful of nature. Today we call it science. Most of the people in our society worship science instead of worshiping God. They're worshiping nature. They're worshiping the creature instead of the creator. And they call that pantheism. You guys ever heard that before? So like atheism means no God. Theism means like God, worship of a God, right? Pan means everything. So pantheism is everythingism. God is in everything. He's in me. He's in you. He's in the tree over there. And so since he's in me, I worship myself. Since he's in the tree, I worship the tree. He's just in nature and all around nature. And this is the de facto worldview of nearly every movie that you watch today. Anytime you watch a movie and it gets into these big questions of retribution and justice, some bad guy's doing something, and they're trying to communicate, you shouldn't be doing this. There will be consequences for you later. They never say, God's going to judge you on Judgment Day. Don't murder that planet of people. They say the universe is going to pay you back. They call God the universe, as if this thing is an agent, as if the universe of matter has the ability to make choices and decide that you shouldn't have done that, so I'm going to punish you. Right? So what's wrong with nature? Why can't we worship nature? What's wrong with appreciating the tree? And I'm saying nothing's wrong with appreciating the tree. What's wrong is looking at the tree and thinking God is in there, I worship it. God is not part of the tree. God is outside of nature. And Dennis Prager had a really good way of saying this. What's wrong with worshiping nature? It's not just that it's incorrect to worship nature. It is evil to worship nature. It is bad to worship nature. It's not just that they got it wrong, that they didn't know there was a God. Why? Well, let's think about 4 characteristics of God. God is outside of nature. He's personal, moral, and holy. That's the God that's in this book, right here, in our Bible. When you worship nature that's not God, you are moving away from the personal, the moral, and the holy to the impersonal, the amoral, and the profane. The thing you're worshiping is no longer personal, moral, and holy. So in other words, it does not care about you. Nature does not care about you. It does not relate to you. Its only good is survival. That's it. You have to survive. Other than that, there are no judgments. And it has no use for holy things like music or cleanliness or order. There's no purpose to any of those things. So like try explaining to your child why they shouldn't eat their dinner from a bowl on the floor licking it up like a dog without resorting to holiness. If your God is nature, there is absolutely no reason that kid can't get down there and lap that out of the bowl like a dog does. But if your God is God, and he says you're in the image of God and that is beneath you, there are higher and lower things, then you don't do that. It's not that it's evil, it's that you don't do it because it's unholy. Because holiness really means separating yourself from your animal nature, right? Holy means separate. As you move away from your animal nature, you're becoming more holy. As you move toward your animal nature, as Paul calls it, the flesh, you're becoming less holy. Your spirit, the holy part of you, is separating you from the animal nature that you have inside. But what does it mean to be amoral? This is pretty important. It's not that nature is immoral. It's not like a true-false test where you intentionally pick all the falses. They did not get, well, here's the rules, and I intentionally do all the wrong things. It's amoral. It doesn't have the same rules. It only cares if you survive. So like the dogs that they would sick on the Jewish prisoners to tear them apart during the Holocaust were not evil, right? They didn't know. They weren't choosing to do bad. It was just nature. It was survival of the fittest. We have the teeth and you don't. It's just like a hammer isn't any more evil when a hammer can hammer in a nail and build a house, or it can bash an innocent person's head in and kill them. The hammer is a tool. It's not moral or immoral. It's what you do with it. And so amoral is, you also can't say good, because if the same dog jumps in a river to save its owner, that dog is also not operating morally. We see it as a good thing. The owner got saved. But the dog was just trained, right? The dog was, this is my owner. They gave me a lot of treats. I need more treats. I'm going to jump in the river. And so getting us into the place where we're not just making instinctual choices, but actually deciding to love God, that's where morality is possible. And so moving away from immoral nature means that we have to become agents who aren't just loving God because he gives us treats, who aren't just loving God because he's threatening punishment. We're loving God because of who he is and what he did for us in saving us when we didn't deserve it. That's why we're supposed to love God, not because we're terrified of him. And so now I hope you see why we have 10 plagues of nature coming on. This is why this is so intense. It is the creator of the universe proving to Egypt, to us, to Egypt's gods, that he is outside of nature and we don't worship nature. So that's what's coming next week when we hit Exodus 5:10. We'll stop there for today.